Hey guys, so we're going to go over an optimal workflow for warehouse hiring. This is team member level, warehouse operative, warehouse colleague, etc. This is just a guide, of course. You may want to run with a couple of different things, but it hopefully gives you a good overview of what is possible with the right system, the right structure in place to recruit the right candidates for these roles over and over again. Firstly, I know that when you look at this workflow, it's only going to have one interview step, no phone screen. Look, I think that's enough. I really do. You may not, but I will say that if you get this step right here on online assessment, if you get that right, then it does so much heavy lifting in this process. So let's start at the beginning. Let me just kind of pinch in a bit there so you can see the kind of sourcing stage here. Now, looking at this, the first key point here is you've got to agree the hiring criteria. And if you haven't watched the video on this, on how to achieve alignment with hiring criteria, you're going to need to watch that. There'll be links in this playbook for you to access that. It ultimately consists of three main parts, which is a job analysis survey of existing employees, capturing really the tasks that people do and the attributes required to do those tasks well. It's really about getting agreement with the hiring committee, so your stakeholders such as hiring managers, trainers, learning and development, etc., on what attributes from that job analysis should actually be assessed in the hiring process, and then potentially an opinion at what stage they should be assessed. Now, it's really important you get alignment on that because everything else that happens afterwards is influenced by what is in that hiring criteria. And you may think you're finding a great candidate as a recruiter, but if your hiring managers aren't on board with that, if the trainers aren't on board with that, if there is misalignment in terms of what you're actually looking for in new hires, you're going to waste a lot of time, not to mention a lot of candidates' time as well. So that's the first important thing. Get that hiring criteria agreed. Next area is advertising. Look, you should be distributing that quite widely. I'd have thought the vast majority of candidates for these roles are going to come through job boards like Indeed, but it's worth putting out to diverse talent pools, talent pool networks. Careers fairs can be effective, particularly localized warehouse staffing careers fairs, etc. In terms of where you want to funnel candidates in, so when they see the role on Google Jobs or Indeed, ultimately, I believe you want to be funneling them into your ATS. Now, I have put ATS or Indeed. What a lot of companies do is they enable Indeed as like a one-click apply portal in order to capture the majority of candidates on the platform that are easily applying for jobs. And look, it is an entry-level role. It's a low-skill position, so you don't need CVs and resumes, and we would not recommend that you ask for them. But we believe that one-click apply is a bit of a false economy for these level roles. What we see is that actually it's better to direct everyone to a single application point in your ATS, funnel them from Indeed, disable one-click apply, because what one-click apply will do is it'll increase the number of candidates applying for a role. It'll make it really hard for recruiters to actually get through to candidates. The vast majority of candidates, as high as 60, sometimes even 70, 80%, won't actually be interested in the role. They're just kind of going through the motions of applying for multiple things. Your recruiters are going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting. If you instead redirect them to your ATS, they can go through what we recommend is an eligibility check. So just checking you have the correct right to work. This will be checked at some point in the hiring process. Maybe it's, look, just to reinstate, you will need to be able to do these elements of the role: physical lifting, working shift patterns. Our shifts start at 6 a.m. on a Sunday, that kind of thing that you want to be communicating as early as you can in the hiring process. You can remove names for these roles as well. If you're a big proponent of blind hiring, look, we advocate for that. There's definitely no harm in doing so. But as long as you're able to track candidates in the ATS, then yes, feel free to enable that. Now, this is the big section. We would recommend an online assessment for warehouse operatives. But importantly, that assessment, and our belief on assessments, as you'll probably know, is to take candidates through a digital day in the life of the job. You should be really communicating through that assessment. Here's what it's really like here. Here's why working in our warehouse, our environment is different. Are you sure you want to continue? It's a great way to kind of re-embed that eligibility check, as well as assessing them against that key hiring criteria you agreed with hiring managers. Obviously, if you can involve them in the question design, the assessment design, they're going to feel like that's something really reliable, really valuable when it comes to an assessment piece. So what we see in companies that do adopt this approach is that candidates that score above a certain threshold, that could be a threshold set by the organization based on what they know works. It could be variable based on a percentile of candidates for a particular vacancy. Obviously, some warehouse roles, particularly near big cities, get lots of applicants. Other roles don't get as many applicants. And you can trigger an action. So look, if they score in this banding, so excellent banding, which is above good, average, below average, will automatically progress that candidate to an on-site interview, or what I'm actually going to call an orientation. If they don't score that, meet that threshold, whatever that threshold is, and you decide, they are rejected. Now, that can be automated, of course, and that's fine. Your assessment should be educating candidates on the role. Candidates can learn about it, and if it's job relevant, they will accept that decision. If they're then progressed to orientation, this can be really interesting. So the interview that takes place isn't necessarily an interview. Look, we've done analysis. If your assessment piece is correct, the interview is more of an engagement piece. Look, here's what it's like. Let us take you through the warehouse, orient you to the warehouse so you're comfortable with it. Are you sure you're happy? Great, here's the paperwork. Off we go. Of course, you can add some interview questions that are aligned with that pre-agreed hiring criteria if you want that extra level of security over making the correct hire. But ultimately, if you get the online assessment piece correct, all candidates should have already demonstrated the skills required to do the job. It's more about whether they're actually really committed to want to do it, in which case you will be able to hopefully assess that through either questions or just being really open and honest with them about what's involved in the role at this stage. If they then score above your threshold, you move them to offer. Our inclination at this point is that ultimately, if you're bringing these people on site, your intention is to offer them, unless you see something really incongruent with their assessment result, or something that isn't going to work for you, in which case you should at that point give personal feedback. It's not fair to auto reject them. It should be a conversation like, I don't think you're quite right for these reasons, or we've got a number of very good applicants, and here are the reasons why we progressed with them and not you. Just a little section on below here on what online assessment should do. So let's really drive this home. If you are using an assessment of any kind, and of course, reviewing a resume or a CV is a type of assessment, you should really only be assessing job relevant attributes. You should be really, with your online assessment, educating candidates on the job about what to expect and enabling them to deselect themselves if it's not for them. Interviews, again, they're optional, I would say, for this role, is look, they should be testing the same attributes as the online assessment. They should be congruent with what's being assessed all the way through. And that's been agreed right at the start with that job analysis of existing employees and hiring managers agreeing on what those attributes should be. And yes, where possible, if you do have a physical role, online assessments can't test someone's ability to pick up and move a box, whatever it is. It's perfectly reasonable in that sense to involve those interactive exercises at interview. So hopefully that recruitment workflow makes sense. Hopefully it was helpful for you. I'd love to hear any feedback, and best of luck. Happy recruiting.